Most people didn't even remember his name anymore. Caleb Hayes had once been the kid everyone said would change the world, a prodigy in college, top of his class, a startup founder at 21, a Forbes profile at 23. And then he vanished. The world moved on. Because that's what the world does. It forgets fast. They remembered the headlines when his startup failed. They remembered the memes, the jokes, the interviews where experts dissected his fall like vultures picking a carcass. But they didn't remember how it actually felt. How it felt to stand in front of 100 employees and tell them it was over. How it felt to walk out of the building alone, past the empty desks, past the logo on the wall that used to make his chest swell and now only made his stomach turn. They didn't remember how the silence swallowed him afterward. But he did. For months, Caleb drifted through the city like a shadow. He rented a tiny studio. He stopped answering messages. He deleted his social media. People whispered that he'd burned out, that he was done, that he'd had his shot. And for a while, he almost believed them. Until the night he stood on the rooftop of his building at 3 a.m., wind cutting through his thin hoodie, staring down at the neon blur of the city, and realized he couldn't even remember the sound of his own voice. He didn't speak, didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He just disappeared. And in that silence, something strange began to happen. He started to hear something again. Not applause, not noise. Himself. The next morning, he woke up and wrote 3 words on the cracked mirror above his sink. Shut it out. Then he turned off his phone and didn't turn it back on. He emptied his apartment, sold his furniture, cleared out everything that wasn't tied to the work. He transformed the room into a cave of focus. Just a desk, a mattress on the floor, a stack of notebooks, and a single ancient laptop. He left social media, stopped watching the news, stopped talking to anyone except the barista who saw him once a week when he bought coffee beans. The world thought he was gone. He wasn't. He was sharpening. He built a routine like iron bars. Up at 5 a.m. cold shower. Work for 10 hours. Run 5 miles. Read 1 book a week. Sleep. Repeat. No distractions. No noise. No dopamine. He didn't chase balance. He chased obsession. While his peers posted vacations and parties, Caleb sat under buzzing fluorescent light, his face gaunt, his eyes sharp, code cascading across his screen like a second language only he spoke anymore. He became invisible, and in that invisibility, he became dangerous. Months passed. Seasons shifted outside the window, unnoticed. He rebuilt everything from scratch, a new platform, lean and stripped of ego, designed not for hype, but for impact. A data engine that could help small businesses automate entire workflows without expensive staff or software. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't viral. It was quiet and flawless. But no one knew. No one saw. No one cared. And that was the point. He wasn't building to be seen. He was building to be undeniable. One night, he paused for the first time in months and looked at himself in the mirror. He barely recognized the man staring back. There was no sparkle now, no social media glow, no fake charisma. Just calm, steady, focused like a blade. And he whispered to his reflection, barely audible, "They won't notice me now. They'll have no choice later." The world had forgotten him. Caleb preferred it that way. He moved through the city like a shadow, hood up, headphones dead, phone powered off and buried in a drawer. The only sound in his world now was the clatter of keys and the steady hum of the old fan that rattled in the corner of his studio. He wasn't chasing hype anymore. He wasn't chasing validation. He was building in silence. At first, it was agony. Every muscle in his body screamed for distraction, to check a notification, to scroll mindlessly, to hear another voice. But he denied it. Every time he felt the itch to reach for his phone, he opened a book instead. Every time he felt the urge to scroll, he opened his code editor. Slowly, the noise inside his mind began to fade, and something new replaced it. Stillness. He became monastic. Up before the sun, black coffee, code until noon, push-ups on the cold wooden floor, protein and vegetables, then back to work. He kept his blinds shut, the world locked out. While everyone else chased trends, Caleb chased mastery. He tore apart every flaw in his old startup. analyzed every mistake until he could see the shape of his failure as clearly as his own hands. He studied great builders like surgeons study anatomy. He filled notebooks with systems, diagrams, and brutal truths about how he had destroyed himself before. Then he set out to never repeat it. Weeks blurred into months. He built the new platform piece by piece. Not a massive app this time. Not a glossy consumer toy, but a quiet, invisible engine. A business automation core that could plug into existing systems and remove 80% of manual work for small companies. He named it CoreLight. It was elegant, precise, bulletproof. Every module he built, he tried to break. Every feature, he stress-tested until his laptop groaned. It became his obsession, his craft, his whole world. He barely ate, barely slept. His beard grew and scraggly. His skin turned pale under the glow of the monitor. But his eyes burned, not with rage, with purpose. Outside, people laughed at him. They didn't see him, but they talked about him sometimes, like an old urban legend. The guy who flamed out. The kid who had it all and blew it. The ghost. He heard about it by accident once, from two strangers chatting behind him at a coffee shop. He didn't turn around, he just smiled faintly, paid for his coffee, and walked out. Because he knew something they didn't. He was coming back. And when he came back, they wouldn't laugh. They wouldn't mock. They wouldn't ignore. They would kneel. At the 6-month mark, CoreLight finally worked. Fully clean. Fast. Beautiful. It could handle hundreds of tasks in seconds. Invoicing, scheduling, logistics, payroll. Everything small companies spent fortunes and endless hours on. He watched the simulation run end to end without a single error and sat frozen, hands hovering over the keyboard. Then he laughed. Not loud, not triumphant, just a low, cracked sound, like the first crack of sunlight through a storm. It was alive, but having it wasn't enough. He needed proof. He needed someone to let him test it in the real world. He walked to the edge of the city, to an old print shop that had been barely hanging on for years. The owner, a weary man named Victor, looked up from behind the counter as Caleb walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Can I help you?" Victor asked. "Yes," Caleb said simply. "I want to save your business." Victor squinted. "You selling something?" "No," Cale said. "I'm offering something. Free." Victor stared at him. "What's the catch?" "There isn't one," Caleb said. "You let me install this. If it doesn't work, I walk away." Victor shrugged. "Fine, but don't break anything. I can't afford to fix it." For the next 2 days, Caleb lived in the shop. He barely spoke, barely ate. He rewired old PCs, integrated CoreLight into the shop's systems, automated the entire chain from orders to invoicing to delivery tracking. Victor watched him like he was watching a ghost rebuild a dying building brick by brick. On the third morning, Caleb pressed a single key. The screen lit up. Orders flowed automatically. Invoices generated themselves. Delivery schedules mapped out in seconds. Victor stared. "Holy," Caleb just nodded. "It'll save you about 60 hours a week." Victor blinked, then grinned slowly. "You're out of your mind. And I love it." Victor posted about it on his shop's tiny Instagram page. No one expected much. But within days, a nearby bakery messaged Caleb. Then a small auto shop. Then a chain of boutique stores. They didn't care that he'd failed before. They didn't even ask. They just saw results. Orders trickled in, then poured. And for the first time in years, money followed. Enough to replace his ancient laptop. Enough to buy better tools. Enough to hire one part-time developer. A sharp, quiet kid named Arjun who didn't flinch when Caleb told him the whole story of how he'd once lost everything. Arjun just said, "Then let's not lose it this time." And Caleb almost smiled. Because for the first time, he wasn't alone. Still, at night, when Arjun left and the studio went quiet again, Caleb sat at his desk and stared at the glowing CoreLight dashboard. He could feel it, the shift, the weight, the current rising under him again. And buried inside it, something dangerous. That old hunger. The part of him that had destroyed him the first time. The part whispering, "Faster, bigger, prove them wrong." He clenched his jaw and whispered back, "Not yet. Not like last time." It started as a whisper. Then it became a roar. The print shop's Instagram post was supposed to be nothing. A blurry photo of Caleb at a dusty workstation. Hair a mess, eyes locked on the screen. But the caption went viral. This guy built an automation system that saved us from shutting down. He wouldn't take payment. Just said, "Let me prove myself." Tens of thousands liked it. Hundreds of small business owners commented, "Who is he? Does he take clients? We need this." Within days, Caleb's inbox was on fire. Orders came from everywhere. Coffee shops drowning in invoices. Florists juggling deliveries. Freelancers buried in spreadsheets. They didn't care who he was. They didn't care about his past. They just saw the results. And for the first time in years, the world wanted him again. The tiny studio turned into a battlefield of motion. Boxes of components stacked to the ceiling. Multiple monitors glowing like cold blue suns. Arjun hunched over code for 12 hours at a time. They barely spoke except to hand each other food or bug reports. Corelight was becoming something huge. And Caleb could feel it, the current surging beneath his feet. The world that once buried him was about to crown him again. At first, it thrilled him. He stayed up late refreshing dashboards, watching the number of active Corelight users climb from dozens to hundreds to thousands. Messages poured in from clients. "This saved my business. I finally slept last night. You've changed my life." And somewhere deep in his chest, something cracked open, a piece of the boy who used to love applause. Then came the attention he hadn't asked for. Tech blogs started calling him the Ghost Founder. News sites published articles titled, "The Silent Comeback of Caleb Hayes." Investors who had mocked him years ago now begged for meetings. Old friends who had ghosted him sent warm, fake messages. "So proud of you, bro." It should have felt like justice. It didn't. It felt like noise. And the noise was dangerous. Because it woke up something he thought he had killed. The hunger. The part of him that ruined everything the first time. The voice that whispered, "Go faster. Go bigger. Crush them. Prove them wrong." He started staying up until 3 a.m. again. Started rewriting Arjun's code while he slept. Started pushing updates faster than they could be tested. Errors slipped through. A small bug caused billing invoices to send in triplicate to dozens of customers. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to spark a wave of complaints online. Within hours, the headlines hit. Is Corelight growing too fast? Hayes' new empire already cracking. And the old mockery came crawling back like rats. We knew it. He never changed. Once a failure, always a failure. Caleb sat alone in the studio after Arjun left that night. Screens glowing cold blue in the dark. And he realized, with a hollow ache, that they might be right. Because he could feel it, the cliff under his feet again. The same cliff he had walked off years ago when he chased growth instead of greatness. The next morning, Arjun confronted him. "You're unraveling," he said quietly. "I'm holding this together," Caleb muttered. "No," Arjun said. "You're strangling it." The words hit like a punch. Because he remembered hearing them years ago, from his old co-founder at his first startup, just before it imploded. He had ignored them then, and lost everything. That night, he didn't work. He sat on the floor of the studio, back against the cold wall, staring at the Corelight dashboard glowing faintly in the dark. He thought about what he was becoming again, a man desperate to be noticed instead of a man focused on building something real. And he remembered why he had started this second life. Not to be seen, to be undeniable. He pulled out the cracked notebook that had survived every failure and flipped to the first page. His handwriting stared back at him, scrawled and sharp. "Shut it out." He picked up a pen and added, slowly, "Don't burn what you've built to prove you built it." He closed the notebook, closed his laptop, and for the first time in months, he slept. The studio didn't feel like a studio anymore. It felt like a storm trapped in a box. The air was hot and buzzing with tension. Stacks of deliveries crowded the floor. Monitors glowed like cold moons in the dark. Arjun typed with mechanical precision at one desk, eyes hollow from too many nights without sleep. No one talked. No one laughed. Even the hum of Corelight's servers seemed strained, like the system itself could feel the pressure pressing in on them. Caleb watched it all from the mezzanine, arms folded, jaw clenched. He had dreamed of this once, a buzzing team, a product changing lives, his name on everyone's lips. And now that it was here, it terrified him. Because he had seen this before. He had lived this before. The tension, the fear, the frantic grind. It was exactly what had poisoned his first company right before it imploded. And he could see it happening again. The same slow rot, spreading from him. He barely recognized himself. He no longer spoke to Arjun except to criticize. He no longer trusted anyone's code but his own. He stayed late every night rewriting work behind their backs. He told himself it was necessary. But deep down, he knew the truth. It wasn't about the product anymore. It was about control, about fear, about ego. And if he didn't stop, he would destroy this too. Then came the moment that broke him. A large client, a national retail chain, signed on. It should have been a victory. Instead, Caleb treated it like war. He demanded impossible deadlines, pushed Arjun's team to work through the night for 2 weeks, micromanaged every feature, every pixel, every line of code. The launch worked barely, but the team looked like corpses, pale, hollow, burnt out. Arjun cornered him afterward, eyes blazing. "You're doing it again," he said. "Doing what?" Caleb snapped. "Becoming the man who ruined everything." The words hit like a blade, because they were true. That night, Caleb sat alone on the darkened studio floor. The city lights flickered through the window. Core light dashboards glowed silently on the monitors, showing thousands of active users. He should have felt proud. Instead, he felt nothing, just empty. Because he knew, if he kept going like this, Corelight would become exactly what his first company became. Something brilliant that died because its creator strangled it. And for the first time since he started this journey, he let himself imagine walking away, closing the laptop, shutting the door, letting it all burn before it could burn him. The thought made him sick, because he didn't want to burn it. He wanted it to outlive him. He wanted it to matter. And it never would if it stayed chained to him. The next morning, he called a meeting. The team gathered in the center of the studio, silent and wary, waiting for another lecture. But Caleb's voice was different. Soft, steady. "I built my first company on ego," he said. "It collapsed. I built Corelight on desperation. It's thriving, and I'm about to kill it the same way." Eyes widened. No one moved. "I thought being focused meant doing everything myself. I thought control was strength. I was wrong." He looked around the room. "I can't carry this alone anymore. And I shouldn't." Silence. Then Arjun. Then don't. So Caleb did something that terrified him. He let go. By the end of the week, Corelight was rebuilt. Not the product, but the structure. Arjun became head of development with full control over the codebase. New leads were promoted to run operations, customer success, and design. Caleb stopped rewriting their work at night. Stopped staying until dawn. Stopped trying to be the engine. Instead, he became the architect. At first, it felt like freefall. He woke at 3 a.m. expecting disaster, expecting the system to collapse without him. But it didn't. It got stronger. Bugs disappeared. Deadlines stopped slipping. Output doubled. The studio filled with energy again. Laughter, arguments, music humming from a speaker in the corner. Corelight no longer depended on him to survive. It was bigger than him now. Then the sharks circled. A global software giant sent an offer 9 figures. Immediate acquisition. "Let us scale this worldwide," their email read. Caleb read it once, then deleted it. Not out of pride, out of peace. Because he finally understood something he had never understood before. Winning wasn't about being noticed first. It was about being undeniable forever. And that meant keeping Corelight's soul intact, even if it grew slower. That night, Caleb walked through the quiet studio alone. Corelight terminals glowed soft blue like tiny stars. And for the first time, he didn't feel the urge to touch anything. Didn't feel the itch to prove himself. He just looked at what they had built and whispered, "This will outlive me." There was no sudden applause. No dramatic headline announcing his return. No victory parade. Just quiet. And for Caleb Hayes, that quiet was louder than any war. Corelight had become unstoppable. The platform now powered thousands of small businesses, print shops, bakeries, clinics, design studios, freight companies. Places where exhausted people had once drowned in spreadsheets now ran like clockwork. Corelight worked silently in the background while lives transformed in the foreground. And none of it depended on Caleb anymore. The cramped studio had grown into a sleek, sunlit workspace filled with plants, laughter, and movement. Teams worked in focused rhythm. Leads made decisions without asking him first. Projects launched that he didn't even hear about until they were already out in the world. He walked through it all like a man strolling through a dream he no longer had to hold together with his bare hands. And he loved it. Because he had finally done what once felt impossible, he had built something that didn't need him to survive. The press called him the comeback ghost. Investors called him a visionary. Old rivals called him unstoppable. And Caleb smiled, not with pride, but with peace. Because he no longer needed to prove anything. Not to them, not to himself. They had forgotten him. They had mocked him. They had erased him. But he had stayed. And now they had no choice but to notice. Months later, he stood on a university stage, speaking to an auditorium packed with young dreamers. No slides, no suit, just him. He told them how he had risen too fast, fallen too hard, and vanished. He told them about the silence, about the months alone in a dark apartment, carving himself down to nothing so he could rebuild from truth. He told them how he cut out every distraction and gave his entire soul to the work, not to be seen, but to be undeniable. The room was silent, hundreds of students leaning forward, holding their breath. And Caleb said this: "You don't need them to believe in you yet. You don't need applause. You don't need permission. You just need to be so focused, so relentlessly, unshakably focused, that they have no choice but to notice." The applause hit like thunder. He smiled faintly, bowed his head, and slipped off the stage before anyone could swarm him. Outside, the city roared as the sun bled over the skyline. The same city that had once buried him now moved to the rhythm of the machines he had built. He walked slowly through the noise, hands in his pockets, no cameras, no fanfare, just a man again. Because he knew something now, even if it all disappeared tomorrow, even if Corelight crumbled and the world forgot his name, he cowed again, because focus was his superpower, and no one could erase that. And if you're hearing this, if they've forgotten you, if they've stopped calling, if you've gone silent and the world thinks you're gone, stay one more night, stay one more day, stay and sharpen your focus until it cuts through doubt like a blade. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to be seen right now. You just need to be so focused that they have no choice but to notice.